So we start with Zanib. We congratulate Zanib for being selected to receive funding from the faculty to attend the ICAM meeting in Vancouver this April.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so if you have somebody that you want to propose to present in our seminar, we are welcome. You are welcome to send it to us, and we'll try to invite. So we, as you know, we have financial assistance from the department for the tuition fees. To continue receiving the support from us, students are required to present their project at least one time at the seminar. This is for thesis, master, and PhDs. Also, non-thesis, they have a short research project. They also can submit their abstract, and they can present. And if you are interested in pursuing a PhD, you are enrolled in the master thesis, you have a good GPA, you can fast track. There are funding from the department to support your fast track. So I think we're done.
So thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for attending the meeting. As you have seen with our seminars, we are trying to not just bring seminars that are just the purely science, following a molecule, doing metabolism, and looking at injury. We're trying to bring things that will be helpful for you when you're here and when you leave. So we have a wonderful presentation today. So after you finish your thesis, what do you do after that? All the celebration, but you have to do something with it. What do you do? So we have two wonderful speakers here. We have got Leah Dolgoy, who is a licensed occupational therapist with over 10 years experience working in health and social services network. And her role is as a local wellness advisor for the Faculty of Medicine and also Health Sciences graduate students, which involves connecting students to appropriate resources on campus. And also she provides psychoeducational and skills-based workshops, outreach and wellness promotion, as well as individual one-on-one appointments. So this is really wonderful. It involves a lot about what's something that you need. And we also, Dr. Chantelle Thauvette, who is a graduate career advisor, also at McGill, in career planning service. So after she finished her PhD at McMaster in 2013, she worked as a visiting assistant professor before she decided to take a leap and pursue a non-academic career in higher education. So she has over 4 years of experience as a career development practitioner at McGill, with a focus on PhD transitions from academia to industry. And between 2020 and 21, she managed the Trace McGill project. So this project, in which they interviewed more than 300 alumni about their post-PhD career paths. So as a graduate career advisor, she currently works to support students as they navigate the job market, academic or otherwise. So you hear some very interesting advice and some interesting ways what to do after you say, I have graduated. So Dr. Chantelle Thauvette and Dr. Leah Dolgoy, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having us. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with Chantelle and with CAPS. And when I spoke with Laura, when she approached me about participating in the seminar series, we had this great conversation where we were talking about all these different topics that, she really sort of sees in her work with you as graduate students and the faculty. And we landed on this particular topic, which is about, transition, career transition, like the anxiety or, mental health or emotional aspects of that. So it's a really nice, this is the second time Chantelle and I are giving this workshop. We gave it at the Glen in the late summer, early fall, right before that submission, like thesis submission deadline. And I think it really, resonated with the students there. So I'm hoping that it will be a topic that will resonate with you today. So I'll start my screen share here. Hold on, you'll tell me if it's working properly. Let's see. Okay. Hold on one sec. Success. Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes, working.
Great. Okay. So at the Student Wellness Hub, we always start our presentations with a territory acknowledgement. McGill University is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the land and waters on which we meet today. I'm going to pause my share. Hold on. Stop my share for 1 second. I always like, whenever I read the land acknowledgement, I like to share a resource or an article, something that I've either been engaging with, or an event going on at McGill, just in the spirit of reconciliation. And so today I'm gonna just put this nice resource in the chat. This one really lends itself to virtual workshops because it's a website. So this is, I don't know if you've seen this before, this is nativeland.ca, which is a nonprofit organization that has created this like beautiful globe, like spinnable globe. You can like move your mouse and spin it, and you can hit any spot in the world and learn about the traditional stewards of the land. And it's the organization is run by a board of directors that's majority First Nations, Indigenous. And so anyway, if this is a resource that you're unfamiliar with, I would really encourage you to just check it out. It's interesting, and you can learn about the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, including and many other nations that are the traditional stewards of the land in Quebec and elsewhere all over the world. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go back into the presentation. Hold on. Okay, great. And we're seeing my screen again, I think. We're good? Great.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Except, is it? Okay, here we go. Now it's moving. Okay, a little bit of delays here. It's funny, we used to be, I feel more adept in Microsoft Teams these days than I do in Zoom. Here we are. Okay. All right, so this is like the official kind of objectives, but basically, Chantelle and I designed this workshop to help you to reflect on like where you're at, where you're stuck, what your coping strategies are, and like you have them, what they are when you are faced with anxiety or transition. This is not your first kick at the can at this, if you're at this stage in your career. And to really kind of talk about how uncertainty, is a part of our lives, and help you to sort of do some reframing around, the place that uncertainty sits in your own, experience. And then sort of like think about how to integrate what we talk about today into your everyday, and how to figure out how to stay kind of accountable to yourself around like your own coping strategies and your own ways of understanding yourself, and things that we're going to talk about towards the end of the workshop. And then concretely, this is what it looks like kind of in the next hour or so. So Chantelle will introduce herself more fully when she starts her part. But my role here really is to do like, we were talking about it as being like a sandwich, and I'm doing like the bread parts, and she's really doing like the meat part in a way. So I'm doing the sort of framing around the topic, talking about, sort of how anxiety manifests in the body, what that looks like. And then how that, plays into career exploration and career uncertainty. And then at the end, I'm going to come back with some like concrete strategies around that. And then finally, we'll end with some resources. Okay. So I'm going to stop my share for a second here and just sort of put this icebreaker question to you. And like, if you feel like participating, great. If you feel that you're not moved to, unmute yourself or put something in the chat, that's okay also. But maybe just to also reflect to yourself, what are you hoping to get out of the workshop? And if you have something in particular that you want to share with me or Chantelle so that we can help ensure that we, hit that in, how we're working, please let us know. Is there anything in particular? Okay. I'm not seeing a lot of chatter, which is totally fine. But so I'll just keep going. But think about what it is actually that you, based on kind of where you're at in your training and your own like understanding of your, and how uncertainty and anxiety around your career manifests, like what are you hoping to get out of this? Okay. Hold on. My screen is not following me. There we go. Okay. So we pulled out two quotes that we just thought were kind of interesting and that we felt resonated with the topic. And I think like part of this is that Chantelle in particular has a lot of experience, and I do as well, more on the mental health, emotional well-being side, but with like supporting students to like change or like let go of what it was that was like their maybe plan A around like why they did the master's or why they did the PhD, and like allow for some shifting to happen. I think a shift towards like career in industry or career outside of academia, for example, is something that takes place like over time. If an academic career, for example, has been like your goal of study for the last 12 years, it can feel sometimes like it's a slow boat that shifts very slowly over time, and that is in itself a process. And this is a nice quote that I liked about like like being aware of like what is in our control around our career and exploration, and being aware of like where we have agency. Usually that's about like our own responses to what's happening, or what we're experiencing, if that makes sense. I think also just to say like like I find our students in particular in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences have just so much exposure to failure, because you do experiments constantly that fail. It's like, you just fail and fail. And I feel like that's gives you a lot of exposure actually to understanding that like failure is a step, and that like, kind of like the sun continues to rise the following day after you've had a failed experiment, even though it can be very disappointing. Like actually you have this kind of beautiful exposure to this that you can also like apply in different ways in your life. Like, okay, I actually failed for, sort of like 2 or 3 months straight, and then finally I landed on something that worked and that I was able to use. And anyway, I find that our students like have that exposure, which is kind of neat. And then here is just sort of one more idea around like framing, which is just the image on the left is an occupational therapy model, which is like I'm often thinking kind of in this Venn diagram where like, what happens with a person sits at the intersection, or like what's going on in your life sits at the intersection of who you are, your spiritual dimension, your emotional dimension, mental dimension, physical dimension, and then your environment, which includes, your institutional environment, your cultural environment, literally what's going on outside, with the weather, like, all of that impacts actually like, what's going on for you. And then your occupation, which is like, what you do for work, what you do to take care of yourself, what you do for leisure. And, you know, I really think about the person and all of these, you know, moments of transition as also being like, you know, right in the middle of that. What's going on with you? What's going on with you in your personhood? What's going on in your environment? And what's going on with your career? What are you doing in terms of, you know, stress management? How are you managing with all of the various responsibilities that you have, be it childcare, elder care, etc. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see this is the wellness wheel that we use at the Student Wellness Hub. And I really like it because I find it's very illustrative of like all the different facets of wellness. So, you know, wellness isn't only about, you know, going to the gym or like eating nutritious food. Like there, you know, there's social wellness, there's spiritual wellness, there's, you know, being like culturally connected to, you know, the things that are important to you, to your cultural community. All of those things are part of wellness. And I think, you know, often when we see students at the Student Wellness Hub, and they're struggling because of a situation of serious situational stress. There's also like some areas in their wellness wheel that also like need a little bit of TLC. You know, often we put in graduate school, we put so much emphasis on the academic and the career that like these other parts of our lives can sometimes get a little bit. Okay. I want to talk a little bit now before I turn things over for the meat of the presentation or the meat of the workshop, which I will turn over to Chantelle. I want to talk a little bit about the nervous system. And your medicine and health sciences students, I suspect that I am not telling you anything that you don't already know about the physiology of anxiety. But I think it's important sometimes just to be reminded of like what's going on physiologically when we feel anxious, when we feel that sort of like physiologically in our body. So, you know, what you're seeing here is like a very simplified version of, you know, what is happening when we have a nervous system response. And like, you know, we often are perceiving a threat. So like when, you know, in a different time, that threat would have been like a tiger that was actually chasing us. But now it's, you know, uncertainty about, you know, our career or, you know, a deadline that's approaching or, you know, some situational stressor that is happening. And, you know, if it was a tiger that was chasing us, actually, like this system would be very helpful to us because, you know, our digestive system drains of blood, you know, the blood goes into our extremities so that we're, you know, primed and able to run away from the tiger. You know, our heart rate increases, you know, to, you know, pump the blood around to get us out of danger, you know, quickly. And, you know, this would be actually like a helpful short-term, you know, kind of response where we end up with, you know, extra adrenaline in order to, you know, get us to safety. This is like, you know, I assume, you know, when I say fight, flight, freeze, this is like, you know, a system or an idea that people are pretty familiar with. But the trouble that we run into often is that like, yes, that short-term stress response can be, you know, helpful. And even like, you know, if you get up to do a presentation or, you know, and you can feel your heart flutter or like, you know, before an exam or something like that, you can feel that, you know, sort of anxiety and it's short-lived. It can actually like be fine and adaptive. But where we get into a more challenging situation or, you know, where we see, like the really negative effects of like that sort of like longer term anxiety is when that like elevated level, that like vigilance or like, you know, that type of thing, you know, rumination, all of that stuff, when it becomes more longer term and it is impacting our sleep, our appetite, our, you know, social interactions, and we have like, you know, people often, you know, report like frequent headaches, like, you know, all of that, you know, digestive problems, relational issues between them and their friends, their partner, their supervisors. You know, this is like a longer term stress response that we see sort of manifested when anxiety isn't, you know, sort of well managed. Okay. So that's a bit my piece. And I'm going to pass it over to Chantelle, who's going to take us through this exercise around design thinking and career transition. So go ahead, Chantelle.
Thank you, Leah. Hello, everybody. I wanted to call attention actually to a great comment we got in the chat when we were talking about what you wanted to get out of this workshop. I loved the comment about path shaping, and that's what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do together for the next bit of our workshop. So to give you a bit of a view of what we're going to do, we are going to literally imagine what shape our paths might take and what role that we might be able to take as designers, as thinkers, as people to imagine what comes after PhD and shape that in powerful ways. So to give you a bit of a heads up, we're going to do some reflection. So I have a worksheet for everybody, and we're also going to do breakout rooms, but there's going to be options if you are not able to actually sit down and chat with your camera and with your microphone. So there will be breakout rooms, but not to panic. You'll be able to choose your own room, and there's going to be options for whatever you might be willing to do today or comfortable doing today. Okay, so with that, I'm going to try to advance the screen. We're sharing our screen today. Let me see. There we go. Yes. Okay, so the exercises we're doing today are based on a framework that was developed by 2 PhDs from Stanford. And the book that this is based on is Design Your Life, which you can pick up at the library. They have lots of online resources. If you've done My Path too, a lot of the exercises in My Path have a bit of a root in some of the exercises that Bill Burnett and Dave Evans do in Design Your Life. So this might be a little bit familiar. The core concept of Design Your Life that we're going to be borrowing today is this question that they have at the center of the book and at the center of their practice, which is, which life is going to bring me joy? And I want to call attention to that as the question, because that's going to be our question for today. And I think it's a good reframe, especially if you're coming out of a long thesis project like a PhD, which is multi-year, or even a long master's where maybe you have spent a lot of time focusing a lot on your academic self and what will bring you academic success and what will bring you academic fulfillment and achievement. If you are really enjoying your thesis and your PhD and you're having a good time, hopefully that is bringing you a lot of joy. But if we think back to the wellness wheel, most people find joy from a more holistic perspective of what it is that they're hoping that they can do with their time on Earth. So what we're going to do today is think a little bit about after the thesis is finished, after it doesn't have to consume a lot of your life, what kind of life can you design that leaves you happy and that centers you rather than centering your academic career, your academic CV, or your academic research. So 2 helpful framework concepts that I want us to take forward as we do this today are a couple things again from Design Your Life and from design thinking. So design thinking itself is a framework that helps you build your way forward. And the things that the authors really point out are enlightened trial and error. It's very much an experimental process. It's not the kind of thing where you're going to immediately know what's going to bring you joy. You're going to have to try things, and then some things are going to evolve and change, and you have to try other things. You're going to try things that seem like a good idea, but then you get more data and realize, actually, this wasn't the thing that I meant to do, and that's all part of the process. And the other thing I wanted to kind of mention as a framework as we start is this concept of empathy for your user, which is straight out of design thinking, since design thinking is very much about creating tools that users are going to enjoy and use. For you, the user of your life is you. So it's important as we head into this to keep yourself in mind. You want to have empathy for your user. You want to make things good for your user. You don't necessarily want to dictate to your user what is going to bring them joy from an external perspective. You want to try to get to know them and empathize with what they really, really do enjoy. Okay, so that's my bit of framework. We are now going to do an activity called Odyssey Plans. It's going to be kind of a mini version. There's a longer version that you can do if you pick up the actual book, Design Your Life. But a quick word on why it's called Odyssey Plans and what this has to do potentially with a thesis. So if you've read the Odyssey or you're familiar with the Odyssey, you know that the Odyssey centers around the character of Odysseus. Odysseus has just won the Trojan War. And after winning the Trojan War, he has this big, big task of finding his way home. And that's most of the book. I was an English PhD. That's what my PhD was in. I was not a life sciences PhD, but I, as a PhD in literature, can see clear parallels here. A lot of what finishing a thesis is winning a really long multi-year campaign, especially a PhD. You're tired at the end and you're not the same person you were when you started, for better or for worse in many cases. You've changed. And a lot of what happens as you shape the path after your PhD is both getting to know yourself, which is what happens on the Odyssey, and also getting to know the world around you as it is now shaped by you and the experiences that you've had throughout your PhD. So the shaping process is long, it's arduous, but it's rewarding, because in the end, what you're trying to do is figure out where next you're going to find your home or your fit. All right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to invite you to download the worksheet, and I'm going to give everybody some time to work on the worksheet as well. So I'm going to make this a actual document that you're going to see in the chat. Sorry, I just got to get my settings. There we go. So everybody gets a copy. It's a Word document. You don't have to write in the Word document. You can write however you like. When I'm doing reflection, I actually like to just write by hand. That's me. The worksheet is fillable if you want to go that way. But this worksheet is just for you. I'm not going to see it in the end. It's just a set of reflection activities to get you started in terms of thinking about what comes next. So there it is. Feel free to start downloading, and I'm going to talk through what the activity involves. Okay, so this is a mini version of the Odyssey plans. The goal of this worksheet is to imagine 3 snapshots of you in 5 years. So rather than do the whole Odyssey plan, which is a longer activity where you actually plan 5 different 5-year plans, we're just going to focus on where you might see yourself in 5 years in a snapshot format. So what does it look like in 5 years? And we're going to use our imaginations for this. Because using our imaginations is a way to at least check in with how we're feeling about different plans, or how we're feeling about the idea of planning itself, which we might talk about at the end. So there are 3 different tasks, or 3 different snapshots I'm going to ask you to imagine. The first one is the current path, and that's your life if it continues on its current track. So if everything goes your way, if you get exactly what you're hoping for on this current track, where would you be in 5 years? So in 2029, where would you be? The next question is the alternative path. So what happens if your current path is not an option? If for some reason the current path just is blocked off, or you decide you don't want to do it, what would your alternative be? It can either be a best case scenario alternative if you're not super happy with your current plan, or it can be a backup plan if you really love your current plan, but you're not totally sure if it's what you're going to be able to commit to. So current, alternative. The last one is my favorite. I find it really fun, but it can be a little bit challenging. You sometimes have to shake off your inner editor or your person who tells you that this is not a good idea. So the wild idea path asks you to imagine a world that doesn't exist, a world in which, through some kind of miracle, your basic necessities and the basic necessities of the people you care for are covered. So the wild idea path asks you, what would you do if you could spend your time on anything free from obligations to clothe and feed yourself through your labor? So if your labor was completely up to you, if you could do anything, what would you actually want to spend your time on? What would be worth it to you to just do, money or not? So those are our 3 options. I'm going to now walk through a sample. Okay, so this is just a sample. This is a fictional person, but this is a sample of what this could look like. Yours may look totally different, but it'll give you a sense of the level of detail that you might start with for a snapshot. So for this person, who we are going to assume is a PhD in experimental surgery, if we ask them what their current snapshot might be of them, if they're on their current path in 5 years from now, they might say Stanford, their dream school. They might say assistant professor of experimental surgery if their goal in life is really just to continue on the path that the PhD had set up for them. And if we ask them who they're with, so if we ask them to fill in details of this snapshot, they might say my new colleagues and my students. And that might be their current path. If we ask them about the alternative, so what are they going to do if they do not become an assistant professor of experimental surgery at Stanford? Here's what they might say. So they might say, where? Vancouver, BC. So a city. Maybe they have a connection to this city. Maybe they grew up there. Maybe they have family there. Or maybe they just like the mountains. Maybe they just want to be in a place that they got to choose, regardless of where their career might have led them to work. If we ask them what they're doing, they might go the industry route, right? So the industry route is often conceived of as a backup to an academic research career for good reason. And so they might say an R&D at a biotech startup. for various reasons. Maybe they know people in R&D and were really familiar with that path. Or maybe for them, when they looked at Vancouver, R&D biotech was something that really just popped as something exciting they could do in that city. When we ask them who they're with, they answer family and friends. So maybe this alternative path for them is about maybe decentering career and more bringing in the social aspects of their life that they don't necessarily see themselves indulging in the current path. And then lastly, the wild idea for this person might be mountain cabin. So not like super, super specific, just mountain cabin, presumably in the mountains. And maybe what they're doing is mountain climbing around the world, and who they're with are their partner and their pets. So 3 different versions of what life could look like in 2029. And what we're really doing with this is trying to brainstorm. So trying to ideate, which is the design thinking term, trying to experiment with different ideas in our minds before we decide which of these ideas we might want to follow up on, explore more, and actually try to live out in small versions in the real world before we make a final decision about what our next step is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to turn you guys over and let you do the worksheet in just a second. Some reminders before I do start our quiet period, though, is, as I said at the beginning, design process involves trial and error, much like experimentation. So you might have a lot of ideas when you do this exercise, or you might go blank. Both are fine. There's no bad ideas at this stage. This is the cheapest way to experiment. You're just experimenting in your own mind. So you can scratch things out. If you get a cooler idea, you can get rid of the first idea. You can switch all the ideas around. All we're doing at this point is trying to give you space and time to think about what might be next. Wild ideas, totally encouraged. And then, of course, as I said a couple of minutes ago, remember to have empathy for your user. So try to turn off or tune out your critical self, the self that says, that's not realistic, I could never get those jobs, people get those jobs, but not me. That voice has no place here. That voice is important later on when you actually are going to commit resources to choosing which path to invest your time in. But at this point, we're really just thinking of ideas. And the question that we're trying to answer through this exercise isn't actually, is this life achievable? Is this going to bring me career stability for the rest of my life? The question is really just, would this life bring me joy in whatever form or shape that means for me now? Okay, so with that, I'm going to say, let's give it a try. So I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to mute. I'm going to invite anybody and everybody to download the handout and give it a try. And we'll come back in just a few minutes.
Chantelle, just so I'm aware, so we're doing the 10 minutes of the like a silent reflection time, and then they'll go into their breakout rooms, right? Okay, perfect. So people can be camera off while they're doing this, I think, and I'll model that as well. I'll go camera off.
Yes, camera off, totally fine for this.
Okay.
Whatever you need to do to do your best thinking.
Okay, great.
Okay, that was our 10 minutes. So what we're going to do next is have you go into breakout rooms and talk about what came up for you during that exercise. So we talked about stress. We talked about designing lives that give you joy. What do those 2 things have to do with each other? Often it has to do with how this exercise landed with you today. So feel free to share how that went for you. You can share what's on yours. You can share what's not on yours due to mental blocks. Use it as a time to at least connect with others about this experience of trying to think about what comes next. And then the question that I hope, if it's gone well, you'll be able to talk about is, which plans of the 3 are you curious about? And how could you take the next step and test out whether these ideas would bring you joy long term? So if you, for example, did come up with a wild idea that you really liked, if you do want to do more mountain climbing in your life, how could you test out ways to build a life post-thesis that would have that in it? Whether that is actually becoming a mountain guide or just moving to a place that has mountains that you can actually climb daily after work. So testing things out is the next phase. So if you're ready and your ideas are fun, you can move on to the next phase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the breakout rooms. You have total control over which breakout room you choose. There's going to be a wild ideas only room for anyone who wants to talk about wild ideas. There's going to be an industry curious room for anybody who is really drawn to industry careers. Lots of people, for example, come into workshops like this really like decided they know they want to start industry careers, but they're not sure what the best way to test that out is, and how to get more information about that. So industry careers room for you would be the one. Academia curious, if you are really committed to the path, if you feel like academia is still the place that brings you the most joy, go into this room and talk about what ways you might want to think about what that means for you post-thesis. The next room is I want to narrow down my interests. So I had lots of ideas and I need to narrow things down. You can rely on your colleagues to try to help you untangle which interests could go together and how you could test out multiple interests through one thing. Lastly, I have a chat only room for people who are not able to join by video or audio today, but who want to engage with others. And then I've also created a prefer to reflect alone room for anybody who is not actually able to join a breakout room. I can literally see that some people are doing science right now in their labs. So if they can't step away, if they're just listening here today, you can go head into that breakout room and no one will interrupt you. All right, so with that, I'm going to open the rooms. They're going to be open for 9 minutes, and then you're going to get an alert that's going to kick you back into the main room. But enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to pop out of your breakout room and come talk to me. I'll be hanging out in the main room. All right, enjoy. The way this works, I believe you have a look and you choose a room that you'd like to go into. You can also change your mind. It's good to give it a good minute. Often the joining takes a while. So if you're the first to arrive in the room, don't fret. Give it a minute and other people may join you. What I like about this one is sometimes some of the rooms get really crowded and sometimes some of the rooms only have 2 people. Both experiences can be fun. It really just depends on where the group is at today. And with that, I'm going to mute. But if anybody has any questions for me in the main room, feel free to unmute or ask me in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the chat too.
Same for me. I'm hanging out here in the main room with Chantelle and whoever ends up staying here, and we'll see you soon.
So I have a question. So these breakout rooms, practically the students discuss between them on the specific topic, that's right?
Yeah, whoever joined whichever room can kind of guide the discussion as much as they like. So if we have all students in the audience, I could assume all students are potentially chatting. I can actually see they're chatting. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a space for students and peers or whoever joined the room to use however they like.
And I think, you know, when we did this workshop last time as well, like it's natural or normal for some emotions to come up when you're thinking about the career and transition. And so, you know, if it feels like a good space to kind of get into that, the people are welcome to. And also there's no obligation to talk about that either.
I'm just making notes. I like to keep a track of which topics actually draw people in. So I'm making notes of the ones that got a lot of curiosity.
So Leah, you're talking about, you know, how to identify when you have an anxiety moment, how you see in your body, you know, how your body reacts. So my first anxiety moment was a few years ago during the pandemic. My husband was very stressed about getting sick, so he practically was trying to force us to stay inside doors, and because he was afraid we may come with a virus or something. Well, it took him practically 6 months until he cooled down a bit. So that was a moment when I felt that I suffocate. I couldn't breathe. But you know, how you identify you have a burnout or something different, that how you, it's the same feeling or it's a different one?
You know, burnout is its own sort of specific sort of set of like criteria that, you know, people would meet to sort of like be considered in a burnout, as opposed to in like in situational stress, or having, you know, a difficult time in an anxious moment, or, you know, I think I would need to understand, I think, a little bit more about a specific sort of set of circumstances before really kind of weighing in on that. But I think, you know, burnout has like a, you know, particular kind of definition around like
So it's not the same thing.
exhaustion.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the same. I wouldn't say it's the same thing, burnout versus anxiety.
Anxiety.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Laura, I appreciate that you brought that up about like the particularities of that really difficult moment in the pandemic, where, you know, I think you were in good company, you know, feeling suffocated, feeling like, you know, your whole world had really shrunk down to like the four walls of your home. And, you know, without all of those pieces that keep us well and connected to other people, you know, I think, you know, many people, maybe the majority of people, you know, felt a way about both, like, you know, the uncertainty of what was going on with the pandemic itself, but also how that was manifesting in our social lives and our family lives, and, you know, all of the ways in which we were, you know, totally out of routine and out of what felt like normal and typical for us. And so, yeah, I think like, yeah, it's interesting actually. The hub gave a workshop at that time called Managing Stress in Uncertain Times. And there are elements of that workshop that I actually drew on, including like the slide that demonstrates what's happening in the nervous system. That slide came out of actually that pandemic oriented workshop that the hub was giving at the time, you know. So anyway, we can see the through line between like how our body reacted, or it reacts in that situation of like intense uncertainty and, like, you know, whatever apocalyptic seeming like you know, doom that many people felt at that time. And also, you know, the body does something similar when it feels or perceives any threat, whether it's like you know, I almost you know, got into a car accident, as it feels similarly to like you know, I'm worried about my job security, which can, you know, feel similar to you know, yeah, everything that is familiar to me is now disappeared, and I don't know when that will end, which I think is, you know, how a lot of people felt at that time.
Yeah, because this morning my husband went to work, so for him, I think the house, it's something that keeps him protected or gives him comfort. And I told him, okay, you drop the kid at school, I'll pick her up. So I didn't get out in this weekend too much because we had guests, etc. And when he called me and he said, oh, you know, I will be able to pick her up. Is not no need for you to get out. And in that moment, I felt that I suffocated and I exploded. I said, I want to get out. So I didn't understand my reaction. He said, okay, it's fine. It's fine. You can go and pick her up. But I didn't understand my reaction. It's an anxiety, or what is it exactly? Brought me to think about what happened in that moment, and him saying, oh, no need to get out. I'll do the shopping. I'll do this. I'll do that. And
Yeah.
so I was wondering what exactly was, because it's something simple, you know, and I'm sure it's something that it stresses out, continues stressing us out.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like there was almost like a bit of a short circuit
Exactly.
around, like around what happened. And yeah, I would say, Laura, maybe yeah, I'm going to give some resources at the end of the presentation or at the end of the workshop for people to like explore, sort of like what came up for them more fully. And I'll include some for staff as well, because I think it's important to acknowledge like, our feelings are information, right? When we feel something, when we have an emotional reaction to something, it's because our bodies, our minds, our spirit are giving us some information about something. And, when we pay attention to what that is, what is my emotion telling me? It can give us a lot of clues about like either there's a need that hasn't been met, or there's something that needs to be different in terms of our communication or our stress management or whatever. But often it starts with a piece of information, like an emotional reaction that is like we're often taught to like ignore, minimize, disregard because, oh, I overreacted, or like that kind of thing. But in fact, like if we can tune in to like what our emotions are telling us and like interrogate that a little bit more, it can be helpful actually to understand what emotional need do we have that isn't being like properly addressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Chantelle, your hand is raised, but you go ahead.
Everyone has come back from breakout rooms. So welcome back, everybody. We had a great conversation in the main chat about emotions. And if you caught a little bit of that, it's definitely worth your while to stick around and talk to us for a little bit about what came up for you during this workshop. We have just a couple minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask anybody who feels moved to share or has a question to pop it in the chat. So what came up for you during this exercise? If there's anything you want to share or questions you want to ask, let us know. If not, come and find us afterwards. So a little quick plug for my services before we move on. I'm going to plug it at the end too. I spend my day talking to master's students and postdocs and PhD students about career planning, which is a complicated topic. And I talk with people one-on-one about how to take that next step. But most importantly and most enrichingly, I talk about how to look within yourself to figure out what direction you want to go in. And that's what this exercise tries to get everybody to think about is if you could cast aside what you're supposed to do or what you're supposed to feel like you should do, what would you actually want to do? And so I hope that you enjoyed doing this exercise, or if you had a hard time with it, I hope that you'll come and talk to me later. But with that, thank you. I'm seeing comments in the chat. With that, I think we might move along and wrap up our workshop. What do you think, Leah?
Yeah, sounds good. So 1 second. I think I take control back of the screen, right? Hold on.
There is a slide left. I forgot. Yes.
Oh.
That was me. I added this slide. Okay.
Oh.
That's it. This is the slide. Okay, yes. So this was my last minute addition. So this is what I wanted to leave you in terms of what's next with this process. So if you notice this steps here, you'll notice there are things that I have talked about before in my little honeycomb. Come here, honeycomb. Come back. Basically, the design process has a couple of different phases. It starts with empathizing with your user, who is you. It then goes on with defining your user's needs, their problems, and their insights. So that's what we did. We talked about Odysseus and the after thesis question. This one is going to be specific to you too. You can do it lots and lots of ways through tools like MyPath to define what it is that you need from your life going forward. We today mostly focused on ideating. So we just generated a whole lot of ideas, which is a really important first step. We tried to think high and low and wide and narrow. The next phase after this is to prototype. So it's actually to start testing out these ideas in the world. There are two main ways to prototype. Most of them you've actually probably heard of before. They're not mysterious. The first one is by talking to people who are actually doing the thing that you're curious about. So if you want to work in R&D, the best place to start prototyping that, to try it out, is to go and talk to someone who works in R&D. And if you're not sure how to reach somebody who works in R&D, make an appointment with us and we can strategize what you might be able to do in terms of building your network or using tools like LinkedIn to find those people or find mentors in R&D who can talk to you about what that is about. The other way to do it is through experiencing it yourself. And that's through things like internships or short experiences, or taking courses on topics that are not related to academic research, or going to conferences that academics don't go to, that are industry conferences. It's ways to dip your toe into whatever you might be curious about. So for example, if you in your wild ideas are like, I really have always just wanted to travel and live in a van. It's a good idea to prototype that by doing a vacation where you live in a van before you actually get rid of your apartment, sell all your furniture, and commit to living full-time in a van. You could do that with careers too, often. There are ways to try things out and to get short-term experiences that aren't full jobs, but give you a sense of whether you would actually like this, or if in practice through trial and error, it's really not the thing for you. So next steps are really talk to people to try out your ideas and find ways to take small steps in your daily life to try new things. Now, I think we can go to the next one.
Okay, thanks, Chantelle. All right, so I'll take over back over here. And I love this cartoon from the New Yorker, and I find it like very funny. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, unless you ask me how I am, in which case I will say I'm fine, even though I am not fine. Anyway, it gets me every time. But this is like, when we were in the main room while people were in breakout rooms, we were having this conversation about emotion and about how sometimes we have reactions to things. I don't know if everybody caught the end of this, but we have a reaction to something, and it can almost like catch us a little bit off guard. And often, if we pay attention to what is going on, instead of disregarding and doing the polite thing and saying oh, I'm fine, actually, I'm actually fine. If we pay attention to what is it that emotion is giving us in terms of information, feelings are information, we can often kind of get to the bottom of what's bothering us, or what is it that needs a little bit more attention? What is it on our wellness wheel that we need to, give a little bit more TLC? Or sometimes, that feeling, if it's for example, a feeling of anger, that's a good indication to us that our boundaries are crossed. There's something that is kind of rubbing, like a stone in a shoe kind of thing. Oh, there's something that's bothering me. Instead of disregarding, let me actually interrogate that a little bit further. Okay. So with that in mind, I want to give this just last theoretical piece that is about anxiety and a sort of understanding of neuropsychologically about what's going on when we experience anxiety. And for this, I'll ask can you picture yourself, in a grocery store for a second, looking at the section of, let's say milk. Have you ever had that experience of going into a grocery store and your regular brand of milk that you always buy is just not there? And or the percent that you usually go for is not there, and just the feeling of paralysis by needing to choose something different and being paralyzed by all of the choice. Or have you experienced existential dread about what comes next when you're nearing the end of a predictable kind of course of study? As human beings, we rely on routine and predictability to minimize the chaos in our lives and our brains. It's why we take the same route to work every day, even though another route would be similarly efficient. It's why we often buy the same brand of milk, because it just takes away the chaos and uncertainty. And we also do this thing where we're constantly predicting what comes next and preparing as best we can to anticipate, what comes next. But when there's uncertainty, which is always going to be the case as we, near the end of a predictable course of study, for example, the prediction becomes more difficult. And what often happens is this prediction error that is because we actually just don't have the information that we need to make a decision. So we end up trying to predict and having the conversation in our head over and over again. What would happen if, did I say the right thing? And, what if I end up XYZ, worst case scenario. So I think what we're going to move into now is in this last phase of the workshop is a very just brief kind of strategy, a few strategies to kind of manage how we feel when we experience this inevitable anxiety. Sometimes I work with students who say to me, I'm experiencing anxiety on a high level, like for the first time in my life, and I don't want to. And like, can you help me cure myself of anxiety? Like, I don't like it, feels bad. I want to be cured. And I have the unfortunate position of saying, having to say, like, actually, anxiety, because uncertainty is a part of life, anxiety becomes a part of life. And it's not actually about curing yourself of said anxiety. It's about figuring out strategies to manage it. Okay. So caveat on this section of the workshop is that I'm going to go through these skills like extremely fast and like on a very superficial level. But anybody who's interested in exploring these things more fully, I'll put in the chat before we part ways. There's a whole suite of workshops that are offered by the Hub that go into like much greater detail, you know, on all of these skills. And also similarly to Chantelle, like my job actually is to serve you as the students in this faculty around your emotional and, you know, mental health, you know, emotional and mental well-being. And, you know, I offer one-on-one support as well as Chantelle does. And I will put my booking page also in the chat so that you have easy access to it. But just starting with skill number 1, have people heard of mindfulness? Is that something that you, it's a bit of a like buzzy word, but you know, all of the skills, these 4 skills that we're talking about are really, you know, heavily rooted in research. And like, you know, for some people, you know, one of these skills or one of these strategies will resonate more, or at different times they'll resonate more. But what I appreciate about like all of them, including this first one that I'll talk about really briefly, again, very briefly, is that, you know, when we are experiencing anxiety, we can feel sometimes like we're sort of like backed into a corner and that we don't have a lot of like choices. But in fact, like even just thinking about the fact that, you know, in this workshop, we're talking about 4 different strategies. It's actually like 4 different choices or like ways that you can express agency when you are experiencing something where you feel like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm in a corner and I don't know, and you know, that type of thing. Okay, so just a brief, you know, kind of primer on mindfulness. Mindfulness can be, you know, experienced in different ways, but like kind of the definition is that you know, it's about being aware and paying attention in a way that is purposeful, oriented to the present moment, and non-judgmental. And, you know, practicing this can, you know, take different forms, whether it's like through meditation. You know, there's a lot of apps. Actually, McGill students have access to a free subscription of the Calm app. So you can download that for free. And also, you know, some people prefer to do, you know, mindfulness practice in the context of yoga. You know, sometimes I share with students, which I can share with you also, you know, a worksheet that is called grounding techniques that can also like, you know, pulls on this idea around mindfulness of like, how do I get out of my thoughts that are ruminating and running away from me and making me feel crummy, like into the present moment, into my body, you know, into today to, you know, kind of calm my nervous system, which has been, you know, pumping out adrenaline and cortisol. Okay, so the second strategy has to do with more cognitive strategy. So, you know, we've named it like ways of thinking, but like, you know, a large part of our lives consist of events or facts that we have no control over. So, you know, having an accident or a friend or a family member becoming ill, or like, frankly, like your computer crashing, or like I don't know, an experiment failing, like, you know, all of these events can cause stress. And like often, you know, we don't have a lot of like control over like, you know, what is happening kind of externally. But we do have some control in terms of how we respond and react. And so like some of this has to do with like, you know, what I was saying before, like understanding, okay, I'm having an emotional reaction. What is my emotion telling me? What need do I have that, you know, that's not being met? And also like, you know, allowing that emotion or, you know, to exist and pass, like sort of similarly to like weather in the sky. We can feel something really intensely and then just know that it passes. So like even thinking to ourselves, okay, I'm experiencing this. And also like, I know that in a couple of hours, like, you know, that I will feel this less intensely. I can reason my way into knowing that this uncomfortable feeling is going to pass. Okay. Again, I'm being so fast. It's like, you know, because really this workshop is about what Chantelle was doing. But these things all, you know, kind of go together. Okay. Yeah, this is, you know, related to what I was just talking about. Okay, so social support, you know, this has to do with like, you know, it seems like such a no-brainer, right? That like social support has a big impact on mental health. And so, you know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know with any of these strategies, but I wanted to just draw attention to like, you know, who are you communicating with? How are you making your emotional needs known at the moment? And like, just to reflect on like, yeah, like what type of support do you need? And like, who are you asking, you know, for support in these different ways in your life? I think, you know, not everyone has like, you know, supportive friends and family, or like, you know, a family that they feel comfortable, I should say, like leaning on in that way. But we do usually within our networks have like, you know, a support system that we can, you know, that we can draw on. I think, what was I going to say about this? Like, yeah, if you're having trouble, like sometimes I hear from students, you know, I don't want to burden, you know, my friends and family or, you know, with, you know, what I'm going through. And I often ask them to kind of like flip things, you know, in the other direction. Like if you had a friend or a family member who was struggling with XYZ thing, how would you feel, you know, if they came to you with this and were asking you for support? And then, you know, the person thinks about it and says like, oh, actually, like I wouldn't feel burdened. I would feel like needed and appreciated for my expertise and, you know, connected to that person. So just putting that on your radar, even though you know all of this, but I'm just imparting this. And then the last piece here is just about, you know, taking care of yourself. I think, you know, we spoke about the wellness wheel. I think if this comes as like if what I'm saying, which is like, you know, taking care of yourself, hold on. If you see that slide and it feels like a confrontational slide, like I don't have time and like, you know, I have a million things to do and I don't have time to like, you know, whatever, go to the gym or like, you know, take a dance class, like notice what's happening for you when I say that, you know, that self-care is important or, you know, well-being is important. Notice what emotional reaction is coming for you, because I think that can be very telling. Okay. Yeah, so I liked these things about like, how are we maintaining joy? We worry, we spend a lot of time on worry, but like, how are we maintaining joy? What are we doing that is bringing us joy at this time? Oh, am I advancing? Okay. So now we're moving into the resources section of the workshop. And I did just want to promote, this is like just a slide that's about what is offered at the Hub. So for those who are, you know, unfamiliar, the Hub is located physically in the Brown building, but there's a lot of you know, work that is done by the Hub that is not like, you know, in the same place where the counseling service and the healthy living annex is, and, you know, where the clinic is. And there's, you know, multiple ways that you can like kind of connect with the Hub. So I'll put some links in that have to do like that are from the virtual Hub, including like a link about like there's a whole section of the Hub website that has like meditation and relaxation activities or guided activities. And then a lot of what we do at the Hub is like, you know, really more like prevention oriented or health promotion oriented, including this workshop that we're doing today, that really has to do more with like, you know, connecting with the student population as a whole to give you, you know, tools and tricks and tips and a point of connection to what's going on. Go ahead, Chantelle.
Back to me for caps. So here are all the links to all of our resources. We're the career planning service. So individual advising appointments are available here. We also do drop-in every day. So we have drop-in every day in person downtown from 1:30 to 2:30, and we have virtual on Wednesdays. So if you just want a quick check-in, 15 minutes, we do that, and that's usually pretty accessible. We have lots of online guides and recordings about all the topics mentioned here. My Future is where you can go to look for McGill jobs or jobs for McGill students, I should say, that are posted by industry partners. We do info sessions and career fairs. The next big one that we're doing is the tech fair. So if you're interested in working in technology, you can check that one out. We also have one that's health focused happening later this year. And lastly, workshops. So we do a lot of workshops. We do grad specific workshops as well as workshops for any student on campus. And I have two to highlight for you. Let's see, advance. There, it's coming. So we have a couple that are coming up that are specifically focused on industry. The next one coming up is industry and non-academic job search, and it's virtual. It's happening on February 14, and we're going to go over kind of the nuts and bolts of job search, including staying motivated on an industry job search, because it can take 3 to 6 months, especially if you're looking for a full-time position. Another really good follow-up to this workshop is exploring your professional path after grad school. We do this in collaboration with MyPath. It satisfies one of the requirements connected to MyPath, especially if you're a master's student. And in that one, we talk about what your values are, so what you're looking for in your next job. We look at job descriptions, and we also explore your skills, so the skills that you want to use in your job. So it's more of a self-assessment and inventory style workshop where we really start to think about what are you going to point towards in your next step. And I think that's it for me. Yes.
Okay, so I'll ask you, Chantelle and I, this is just our second time giving the workshop. And so if you have any feedback, you can follow the link or even just like send me or Chantelle an email. That's usually more direct because I actually don't get access to see the survey results for like a period of months. So if you actually have any feedback that you would like to give us that would help us to improve the workshop going forward or what have you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm going to stop the screen share and just open the floor if people have questions. And while we do that, Chantelle, I'm going to just grab some of those links that I was talking about and put them in the chat so that people have access to them.
Sounds great.
So thank you very much, Leah and Chantelle. That is really wonderful. Any questions? Please feel free to just unmute and ask. So I like the idea, the ideation and the prototyping part because that's reminiscent of our course, Surgical Innovation. So, so one of the things that you talked about is having to have support, social support, especially because I saw when you had the rooms, the ones that is, if you unknown, there were quite few, but industry, the known parts, you see a lot of people in there. And you also talked about anxiety. So one of the things when I find myself sometimes when I'm trying to give some support to a family member is that I have also some bias in. If a family member says, when I go and study medicine, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And if they, if they say I'm going to go to the North Pole and sit in a hut, I'm like, no. So how do you encourage, because some people genuinely, that's what they want to do. And so how do you encourage people who are supporting not to have that internal bias?
Ooh, that comes
I
up.
love it. That's great. Go ahead, Chantelle.
No, I was going to say that comes up. So like a lot of the people who I talk to do have that voice in their minds, right? Like they have the voice of a person who wants the best for them, but has a very narrow idea of what that means, right? Like I have people who talk about their families not accepting their career paths. I have people who talk about like really needing to make decisions that don't center themselves, but that center the needs of their children who are currently registered in school in Montreal. And so it is important to kind of assess where you are and what brings you joy in the context of your responsibilities to others, right? Sadly, I never get to talk to the actual support systems. I only get to talk to the career changers. In terms of, I suppose, thinking through how to nurture supportive relationships, even if you're taking a bit of a risky step, I suppose the main thing that I often talk to people about is having kind of the courage to assert that you're worth it. Like, it's your life. It is yours to live. It's your time to spend. And people who have your best interests at heart often are sometimes giving you advice from a place of fear from you, and not from a place of knowledge, right? So the more knowledge that you can gain by talking to people, by actually trying things out, the more you can maybe try to address the fear that people who care about you have, in terms of whether you'll be able to provide for yourself based on your plan.
Can I chime in? Chantelle, I thought your answer was beautiful, and I totally appreciate this question. I feel like it's kind of almost like the elephant in the room, right? In a way, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I think one of the kind of like powerful, and I spoke about this in the context of like how much students in our faculty doing graduate work fail, which is like a lot actually, and like get rejected, frankly. Like, it's just, you have like such beautiful exposure to that, which gives you so much more resilience around failure. And I also will put the same idea around exposure into this conversation around like a change in career or like the more that we expose ourselves to other possibilities, like the more confidence that we have and like the people around us have in like those possibilities being potentially realistic or like not so scary, right? So like yeah, I'm trying to think of sort of an example of this, but you know, yeah, I don't know, we have, as human beings, we have a negativity bias. It's like what has allowed our species to like continue for thousands of years, is that like we you know, are always like looking out for threats and like concerned that, you know, but unfortunately the way that this manifests in today's day is that like we also you know, are always like we hear the negative feedback like way louder than we hear, you know, positive reinforcement. And so like sometimes we also have to do some stuff to like consciously like counter the negativity bias that we have, whether it's like, you know, making a list of like, you know, yeah, like, you know, I did this thing that was like not sort of sanctioned by you know, my family or culturally or, you know, whatever, and like this is how it made me feel, and like journal about that, so that we don't hear like our inner critic, or we don't hear like what we perceive you know, our family would say so loud that it like drowns out our own voice or our own lived experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions?
So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank Leah and Chantelle for that wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank everyone for coming to this wonderful seminar. So as Laura said at the beginning, we have money. If you want to move from a master's to a PhD, we'll be giving some money to those who are making the transition. So the first 15 get money. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Don't be strangers. And I just put the EAP, the Employee and Family Assistance Program link as well, which I remembered that I was thinking to do. Take good care, and yeah, please feel free to reach out if ever. Okay.
Have fun prototyping.
Mm-hmm.
Fail when it's low stakes. That's the
Oh,
great.
Chantelle, somebody's asked you to put a link to the workshops for industry.
Ooh, Yeah, absolutely. I will put a link to all of our events. So every month we have new events. Right now, February and March, we're doing a bunch of industry events, by which we just mean kind of non-academic careers for grad students. Next month in March and April, we're going to do a bunch more on academic careers. So we do both each term, and I'm stalling because I'm getting the link. Here it is. But you can find all of our events on this page. We do stuff every month that you are really warmly invited to attend. A good mix too of virtual and in person we aim for people who aren't necessarily on the downtown campus on the regular.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, bye everyone.
Have a great day.